Okay, we're ready, Councillor Coburn, if you want to start.
Great. Well, welcome everyone to another Skills Economy and Growth Scrutiny Commission meeting. My name is Mete Coburn. I'm a councillor for Stoke Minton and the chair of this commission. We're very grateful today to be joined by Councillor Carol Williams, which we'll introduce shortly, and also by Andrew Monk as well. The discussion for today's meeting is specifically looking at Hackney Skills offer post-COVID-19, or I guess during COVID-19, as sort of the Hackney labour market it's obviously changed dramatically as the whole country does, and we're looking at some of those challenges, what it means, how we can sort of purpose what the team in Hackney's been doing. As you all know, the Skills and Opportunities team in Hackney has, not only just in London, but, has won national awards for some of the great work that they've been doing around, they offer around apprenticeships and lots of different things. So it'd be great to have that conversation. Before we do kick off, what I do want to do is, it would be great if we can go for a quick round of apologies for absence, which I've got one from Councillor Polly Billington. We will be joined by Councillor Steve Race and Councillor Richard Lufkin, who will be joining us imminently. I believe they're just sort of coming on from another meeting. Any other apologies? I don't think so, because we don't have any other members.
No.
Okay. Perfect. Well, let's do a quick round of introductions, and then we can just move through the business item in the agenda. We can kind of come to the main part of the commission meeting. So, as I said, my name is Mete, chair of the commission. Councillor Smythe, would you like to go next?
Hi there, my name is Councillor Smith. I'm a councillor in Stoke Newington ward. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Palace?
Hello, yeah, Councillor Sam Palace, a councillor for Cazenove ward.
Councillor Williams?
Hi, my name's Carol Williams. I'm the Cabinet Member for Employment Skills and Human Resources. I'm also a councillor for Hoxton West Ward.
Thank you very much for joining us today as well. Andrew?
Hi, I'm Andrew Monk. I'm Head of Employment Skills and Adult Learning at the Council.
Brilliant. Thank you again for joining us. And also we have Timothy Upton, who is our... Do you want to say hello?
Hi, I'm Tim. I'm the Scrutiny Officer for this commission.
Perfect. And we've got Simone as well.
Hi, Simone van Elken. I'm a Strategic Delivery Manager and I work on the Inclusive Economy Strategy.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you also to the ICT team, Mario, and the rest of the team for facilitating this conversation for us and making it possible during these very challenging times to be able to be meeting. So the second item, business item on the agenda is that, do we have any urgent items or order of business? I believe that there are no urgent items. If there is anything, please, any of the members, would you like to indicate any items that I'm not aware of? Nope. Okay. Do members have any declarations of interest that they would like to declare? Okay. Minutes of the previous meeting. The minutes of the previous meeting on the 20th of July are on pages 1 to 10 of the agenda. Do members agree with the minutes of the meeting? Yeah. There are no
Agreed.
horizon.
Agreed.
Okay.
Agreed.
Okay, agreed. Perfect. Well, that takes us swiftly on to our main item agenda. So just to set context for the members of the commission and obviously for the members of the public as well, this Scrutiny Commission specifically undertook a review into looking at how we could tackle socioeconomic inequality in Hackney. And this was prior to COVID. And this was looking at specifically how we can make sure that local people benefited from the growth that took place in Hackney over the last 15 years and obviously going into the future as well. And we, Simone is here, she spoke about the inclusive economy strategy. The council published an inclusive economy strategy, which is now sort of being reviewed, given the current circumstances. So what we have done as a commission is our next review was specifically looking at how we could rebuild Hackney's economy, specifically looking at how we can make sure there's a green agenda, building really a more greener and fairer economy specifically around just transition. And what we're trying to do now as a commission is really to try to understand, how Hackney has been impacted, and with the limited information that we do have, obviously considering that this is still a very real pandemic, and the economic, I guess, consequences and sort of the economic downturn that we're going through probably isn't as present as it will be in the next year or two. So we're really trying to go out there, speak to lots of different people to really try to understand how it impacts residents in Hackney and some of our most vulnerable equality groups, in order to make sure that we're putting forward valuable recommendations for cabinet members like Councillor Carol Williams to help her in her role in making sure that we're developing an inclusive economy for Hackney. So today's meeting, as I mentioned earlier, was specifically around developing a skills offer fit for post-COVID-19 recovery. And it's really understanding how the pandemic has had a significant impact on the UK and its economy and our people. And obviously it's had a profound impact on the landscape of work, which will change the types of businesses that we find in our economy in the country, and also, of course, in Hackney, the types of roles within those businesses. We're already starting to see lots of businesses operating through working from home. And also the demand on skills with those parallel changes. These are continuously changing elements as well. It's not to say, as we said, we're continuously evolving. We've already seen that, the government's brought in new restrictions to new guidelines yesterday as a result of the COVID level actually increasing back to level 4 now, which again will have a huge impact on our economy. So everything is subject to change, and therefore is slightly intangible. And then obviously when you look at sort of the well-being side, particularly around adult education skills, it will be a big significant structural change. And at present, well-being and community learning aspects of changes resulting from COVID are not being talked about sufficiently, which is why we felt like this conversation was very important. There are examples of schemes that have been put out by the government, most notably the Kickstarter program. I had a discussion with Andrew offline about this, and this is something that we will, as time develops, we will explore in more detail. But specifically for this meeting, what we wanted to really look at, the areas that we wanted to specifically look at is, have emerging ways of what emerging ways of working and the types of new roles that will be available post-COVID-19, have they already become apparent in our local economy? What skills are likely to be in high demand in the job market in the near future? How can Hackney best incentivise and promote successful partnership working between the council and learning institutions and businesses to ensure that a skills gap does not occur? And finally, how significant is the risk of residents and businesses being left behind the occupational paradigm shift, and how can Hackney best mitigate these risks? So I'd like to welcome, as I said, Councillor Carol Williams, who's a Cabinet Member for Employment Skills and Human Resources, and also Andrew Monk, who's our Lead Officer for Head of Employment Skills. I should just start, by saying, as I mentioned earlier, both Carol and Andrew have done some, amazing and phenomenal work over the past couple of years, creating lots of different opportunities for young people in our borough and lots of those who actually need it. So we're very pleased to be joined by them. So essentially what I'd like to do is I'd like to invite Andrew and also Carol to kick us off with some of the questions that we sent to you. And this is specifically looking at, could the Skills Economy Growth Commission reach out to local integration boards for guidance? What can we do in terms of working with private companies for future meetings? Those are sort of some of the areas that we're looking to sort of cover, but I know we discussed this offline anyway. So why don't you kick us off, and then we can then sort of follow up with questions. And just also to introduce Councillor Steve Race has also joined us in our meeting. Whichever way you prefer to go first, if Councillor Williams, if you prefer to go first, and then Andrew, if you want to join after.
So I think I'll kick off, and then to give you a a broad scope of what we're doing. Thank you for your kind words, Councillor Coban. I think it is right to start off talking about the council's record when it comes to employment support. And as you've rightly said, the apprenticeship team have delivered a multi-award winning scheme for Hackney, and I know we've talked about it several times at this Scrutiny Commission, but because of the focus of tonight's meeting, I think it's well worth saying that again. They put on a really big summer recruitment campaign this year. It was incredibly successful. If you want to count success in terms of the number of applicants, we had more than double the number of applicants than we had last year, and I think that's due to two factors. And one of them, of course, is that it is a quality scheme, that it is multi-award winning. People know that they can trust it. I think the other factor is the economic climate that we are now living in, and people recognise that because of the impact of the coronavirus pandemic, the economy is going to take a massive hit. Somebody's got their microphone on. The economy is going to take a massive hit, and there's going to be a significant impact on jobs and availability of jobs, particularly once the furlough scheme comes to an end at the end of October. We also have an apprenticeship network, and I think there's a lot of work that we need to do on that to refresh the network, given the coronavirus pandemic, working with businesses to support them. They're going to need even more support, I think, in the coming months as they start to recognise the impact on their own businesses. But there's also public sector organisations, and I think they're going to be key to the future economy. We also deliver a supported employment programme. We had two online graduations during lockdown. One of them of the scheme that was delivered by Hackney Council, and for the second year running at Homerton Hospital. And that is really important for young people who have got special educational needs and support needs. And that will continue to be crucial for the future, because in an economy where people are going to find it difficult to get jobs, they are going to find it even more challenging. And of course, earlier this year, we started the adult traineeship programme, which is also interrupted by the pandemic and lockdown. And that's going to be also important going forward. We, as you've rightly said at the start in your introduction, we set out the inclusive economy strategy and building a better Hackney, and that is going to determine and set out what we do going forward. Nationally and locally, the economy is experiencing the largest recession on record, and the focus for the council with regards to inclusive growth and developing an inclusive economy has had to shift towards building back better rather than widening access to economic growth that had existed previously. There's been, as I've said, a profound impact on the labour market, and there's more to come. We already know that coronavirus has had a disproportionate impact on ethnic minority communities, and a report published by the LSE has shown that individuals who are young, low paid, black, in self-employment, and those who have low education levels or live in large families are disproportionately affected by the current recession. And when the furlough scheme comes to an end, around 1 million furloughed workers may not have jobs, not all of those in Hackney, of course, right across the economy. And there's a lot more that the government can and should do to save jobs. And that's why Hackney councillors, along with over 1,000 other councillors across the country, joined the Keep Britain Working campaign to preserve jobs and protect livelihoods. The employment and skills team was reorganised under lockdown, right at the start of lockdown, to better target and deliver services to residents looking for employment, for those who lost their jobs during lockdown, residents in the final year of college or sixth form, or those from university who aren't planning to return to education. And the three key priority areas for that reorganisation is the information, advice and guidance, employability support and job brokerage. We also, during lockdown, moved the publication of the jobs employment newsletter from fortnightly to weekly. I think that was really quite key. It seems like a small thing, But information on available opportunities was really important during the first phase of our response to the pandemic. People were looking for work, and a lot of the work that was coming in was primarily with health service and also with supermarkets. And so pushing out that information to residents was incredibly important. The newsletter includes jobs, apprenticeships opportunities, both within Hackney, the council itself, within the borough, but also across London, and it also signposts recipients to online training. In September, 2 key services were integrated, and you heard Andrew introduce himself as the head of employment and skills and adult learning. Previously, you would have heard him introduce himself as the head of employment and skills. So we integrated those 2 services. We had these plans set out from last year that were interrupted by coronavirus pandemic and lockdown. As soon as we were able to, we fast-tracked the integration of the 2 services. That is now live. And doing so will enable us to, as a council, to respond to the pandemic, set up emergency response services. Sorry, we interrupted it to allow us to set up emergency response services and to support staff to go to work from home. The integration of the 2 services will allow the council to better respond to the pandemic and to deliver enhanced employment and skills pathways as part of rebuilding a better Hackney. And of course, all of the above really does need to be seen in light of changing circumstances. And today we heard the Prime Minister at the dispatch box make further announcements on upcoming restrictions. We don't know what's going to happen, and the ground is shifting all the time. We don't know, we don't have any data yet on unemployment levels. We have some data on unemployment levels, but of course, after the furlough scheme, that could change quite significantly. So in the next few months, we have to keep an eye on that. And I'm sure that the Skills Economy and Growth Commission will want to do so too. Just in terms of your future work programme, you and I had an offline conversation, Councillor Coban, and one of the things that the Commission could potentially look at in the future is the Council's approach to the adult learning offer, and how we give equal voice to adult learners, training providers, as well as tutors. Because as you correctly identified, we need to shift, we need to be quite agile in how we respond to the changing skills need in the economy in the coming months and years. And I'll leave it there and hand over to Andrew.
Thank you very much, Councillor Williams. Andrew?
Great. Well, look, I'll try to be brief because Councillor Williams has covered an awful lot of ground, but I guess just talking through some key points, which obviously afterwards I'm sure there'll be some questions on. This is what we're doing on employment skills adult learning is really at the heart of the inclusive economy strategy and the rebuilding a better Hackney strategy, both of which are kind of key corporate documents for the council. They were before COVID, even more so now. As Councillor Williams says, we are seeing large numbers of Hackney residents on universal credit now, and also large numbers on furlough scheme, particularly obviously in sectors such as hospitality and retail, and so it remains to be seen the extent to which universal credit goes up further at the end of that furlough scheme, and I'm sure we can share the data with you. But I also think we're seeing in coronavirus a number of sectors, not least potentially sectors such as green jobs and student jobs, potentially see some growth. But again, it remains to be seen exactly what that looks like and what some of the kind of equality angles are on that as well. During the summer, we did some research, sort of talking to young people around how they were experiencing what it's like living during COVID-19, particularly in terms of employment opportunities. This aligns very well with actually some of the work of the Young Futures Commission. And some of the interesting kind of headlines coming out of that was young people don't necessarily see their employment challenges in isolation. They sit alongside, for many of these young people, some of their mental health challenges are concerned, and often they sort of amplify one another. Young people talked about the importance of clear careers, advice and options, and the extent to which I kind of look through the council, to the council and local partners to provide clear guidance and information on that, particularly in these uncertain times. Young people talked about the importance of the work the council's done and hopefully will be doing more of around paid work placements and connections, making sure people had a sort of foot in the door, again, especially as opportunities become more few and far between. And so that was incredibly useful learning for us as a service. And it sort of provided, I guess, backing to work already underway on a number of areas. Firstly, further enhancing our Hackney Opportunities digital service, a digital offer, which was there before COVID-19, but took on even greater importance during it. And the idea of having a no wrong door approach to that careers advice and making sure that that was a place not only for the council, but partners to post opportunities. And as Councillor Williams said, even more important for the council to have these clear information, advice and guidance offer and employment pathways. And I think that there was an expectation increasingly that the public sector would continue to lead by example in creating opportunities. I guess the last bit for me is just talking about, we did work with partners quite intensively over the summer around a summer offer. So working with local FE colleges, voluntary sector organisations, job centre, to provide a summer offer for 16 to 24-year-olds, which focused on employability support, IAG, things such as kind of online webinars around options, and that sat very closely alongside Young Hackney's offer. And I think what was so interesting about that work is the desire of those partners to come together around that, which we will be looking to build upon. I think I will leave it there. I'm sure there's lots more I could say, but yeah, we'll leave it there.
Amazing.
Sorry, Chair, can I just come back on one last thing that I forgot? I'm really sorry, I forgot to just mention this. Last week, we signed a memorandum of understanding with London Metropolitan University, and this starts a new partnership to get young people into work and improve employment opportunities for students across the borough. And what we want to do is work with other universities who have campuses in the borough to deliver a similar memorandum of understanding and partnership to increase opportunities over the coming months and years as well. Of course, that work is yet to be revealed because we are only just starting out on some of those conversations, but I did want to alert you to it.
Great, thank you. Councillor Palace, I can see you're indicating to speak. I think we'll just use the next half an hour to ask lots of questions and yeah, kind of go a bit more detail. Councillor Palace?
Great, thank you very much, Councillor Coburn, and thank you so much for those reports and all that is being done in very, very difficult circumstances. I mean, the scale of mass employment that we could be facing is extremely scary and concerning for residents across Hackney and the country. So I've just got kind of two questions. One, just building on something that Andrew was just saying about where do we see kind of other growth sectors coming out of this potentially, and how can we potentially support those sectors and ensure that both those who are in adult education and young people are able to potentially access opportunities. And then my other question is about the relationship between the work you're doing around adult education, apprenticeships, and resident participation. Is there a relationship there? Because I think there is a real opportunity actually in the review that's being undertaken with resident participation to do a lot of focused work particularly on Hackney housing estates. There's a fund called the Community Development Fund, which each estate is entitled to, which they've just upped to £3,000. And they're saying that estates could potentially collaborate. I was just wondering, is there any work being kind of done around that, any thinking around that relationship and what that could look like? And I think, it could be a real opportunity to do some really focused work. Thank you.
Good question. We just take them each as it goes, and then, yeah.
So I'm happy to kick off. So just on the kind of growth sectors, and I might also bring Simon in from policy team at one point. This is what happens, Simon, when you come along. Look, I think it's fair to say nobody quite knows what sectors are going to grow, but certainly some sectors within bits of tech and creative are seeing significant growth. I think your question more around how we skill people up is a very pertinent one and speaks to kind of what Councillor Williams was saying before, and Mette around perhaps a focus of this commission around how we get people skilled up. There are some challenges here though, because, and this is a bit of a geeky answer, some of the way adult education budget is funded is very focused on level 2 and below, so quite low level skills. So one of the things, Councillor Palace, we're looking at, and one of the reasons we're working so closely with people like New City College and universities on, is what does a skill system look like in Hackney overall? So not just what does Hackney adult education do, but what does Hackney, what do we do as a council? What does New City College do? What does London Metropolitan University do? And how does it all come together with businesses to design that skill system, if that makes sense? But as you can imagine, that's a fairly important and big piece of work. And just on your conversation about housing, Simone and I actually were in a very interesting meeting earlier today about community halls, and a very important element of inclusive economy strategy is how we better use our assets to deliver on some of the agendas you're talking about. So how might we use assets such as community halls to make sure that we are preparing people for opportunities and providing information, advice and guidance? Obviously, this is challenging within the COVID-19 context, but how might we use it with people who maybe are finding, due to digital exclusion, some of the approach to IAG, which is just online, challenging? I think what's reassuring about these conversations under that sort of banner of inclusive economy is that these conversations are now being had in response to sort of the way you're asking the question, which perhaps they weren't a couple of years ago.
Simone, I don't know if you want to come in before me or...
I have to say that sadly the internet on my computer dropped out for the majority of that question, so I might find it a bit difficult to respond in detail. But if anybody can give me a recap, I'm happy to jump in.
I think it would do with the sectors, Simone. Which sectors, if you have any insight, might be growing because of COVID-19? Yeah.
Well, I think the main sector that is probably seeing investment is health and care. I think we saw a period from about March till June where just about every other sector of the economy, sadly, was dropping quite a lot in terms of productivity. It's hard to say looking forward what's going to happen, but I think, as outlined by Councillor Williams, Andrew, in the introductions, we're going to see, I think, arts and culture struggle, hospitality, and some elements of retail. So what things then? Public sector at the moment is probably a more important pool for employment, simply because it is kind of here and it's being invested in. But I think longer term, you obviously have to look at, your business base as a London economy, because that's also a large sector for employment. But it's just hard to predict what happens with localized lockdowns, and how long they take to know which bits of the economy find it easier to bounce back and which bits will struggle longer term.
Yeah, I mean, just wanted to pick up on that point, actually. I guess a question to you, Andrew, and to Councillor Williams is, obviously you work a lot with, you've been in a lot of work to engage with sort of businesses around sort of the employability of opportunities for different groups in Hackney, and how you marry those opportunities. I wonder, how has this impacted your work with those businesses and the engagement that you have? Are you still sort of receiving positive response from some of our big businesses around sort of like the skills offer, or like rethinking, like digital skills in the digital offer? Or is it something that you're finding much more harder to engage, just given the nature of the fact that businesses are probably very busy with sort of mitigating the economic impact of COVID?
So can I just come in there? Just to respond to the previous question as well. So I think, sorry, I don't know if it's Simone or Simon. I've heard both tonight. So excuse me if I pronounce your name incorrectly. I get really touchy when people either pronounce my name incorrectly or spell my name incorrectly, and they do. It's Carol, but they get it wrong. So yeah. Conversations that I've been having with other London boroughs, particularly those in the centre of London, is around the health and social care sector. And before coronavirus, that's a sector that was predicted to grow. Conversations that I've had over the last 6 months seem to be suggesting the same thing. I haven't yet heard anyone saying that we expect health and social care employment to contract anytime soon. As soon as I hear that, there are challenges for us, and there are expectations for us as well as a local authority when delivering those opportunities, particularly in a borough that is as diverse as Hackney is, and when we know that coronavirus has had a disproportionate impact on ethnic minority communities. There is a challenge for us when we know that employment, the terms and conditions aren't always the best, and we've seen ourselves in the borough campaigns around terms and conditions for some of those workers within health settings. So I think there's a lot of work for us to do to improve quality of employment or drive quality of employment, and to ensure that what we're doing is supporting residents to get into employment in sectors where they could potentially be further risks, because we don't know what's happening with coronavirus. So those are the challenges that we as political leads across central London have been discussing. There's a lot more work to do. Just touching on the question that you raised, Councillor Coban, I think it's really easy to forget, because we have made so much progress over the last 6 months, the intense resource and officer time that it took to focusing a response to coronavirus. In the first few months, all officer time was spent on ensuring that the first few weeks, ensuring that our council staff could work from home, that we had the IT infrastructure to support them. There was a lot of time and attention ensuring that all of our staff were safe, those who were working from home and those who were not working from home, because of course not all council employees do work from home. And they wanted, particularly the trade unions, wanted to ensure that their members were safe in their working environments. We had to stand up a emergency food system as well. There were volunteers to coordinate across the borough. So there's a lot of intense work. So I just kind of want to set that scene so that your expectations are realistic in terms of how much work we have been able to do over the last 6 months with employers. We started around, I think it was around July, so just before the summer recess, enhancing our own response as a council. And I think now what we need to do is focus our time on working with employers. And of course, as I've already said, in October, the furlough scheme will come to an end. And that will take more officer time in terms of what we do next around employment and skills and the response through the inclusive economy strategy. And so there's a lot of work going on. And I think that's kind of the context that I want to set.
Yeah, and just to say as well, like, sorry if that came across wrong, because it definitely didn't mean there was a level of expectation. It was just, I just wanted to get an understanding of how open businesses or employers were to kind of talk about it.
Can I just do a very, very quick point?
I was going to come to you just to ask if you had a follow-up anyway.
Very quickly, just about resident participation, because I really do think there is an opportunity here, and there's a review of the current policy, and they're looking looking to feed council policies across the board. Could it just be one of the actions that taken? Everybody's frozen for me. Could one of the actions be taken from the meeting that be kind of investigated kind of further?
Of course.
That would be great. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Palace. Councillor Race, I think Councillor Smith, did you have your hand up before? Yeah, in the previous round. Sorry, Councillor Race, I'll come to you after Gilbert.
Thank you very much, Chair. I mean, I think this is a really fascinating conversation. There's so much going on in the world right now. Post-pandemic, obviously, I think that a lot of this conversation should be underpinned by well-being. It should be underpinned by sustainable development goals, and it should be underpinned by the climate crisis. I think what we've got coming shorter and more flexible working in the future. Opportunities that are arising. I mean, essentially, what collapsed in the pandemic was travel, tourism, hospitality, and retail. And some of the winners that have already been mentioned in terms of the sort of emerging opportunities, the health sector, not just nurses and clinicians, but pharmacists, carers, health trust managers, professional service roles in regards to procurement and finance, demand management, recruitment and training in the NHS, etc. Policy research management roles, digital healthcare will be on the rise as well. It's another opportunity, an emerging market, and obviously science and research. Another emerging part of the economy is supply and demand sector. So we need bright minds to simplify and better organize the supply of essential products, from food to medical equipment. So there's lots of logistical roles out there that need fulfilled. Warehousing and transport, delivery, need the best distribution minds to kind of work it out. There's huge opportunities there. Amazon have just employed 100,000 people right across the world to kind of embark upon those ideas, because we're sort of embracing the idea of convenience culture. Other areas, politics and governance. Obviously, there's opportunities there. I won't go into them, but one of them would be disaster and crisis response roles within government. I think there's a big opportunity there, particularly in regards to climate change. Risk assessment and management roles. I mean, the list goes on. Manufacturing. I reckon there'll be a renewed focus on local production capability in regards to food and drink, and also pharmaceuticals. And companies in the fast-moving consumer goods sector will be keen to secure new talent to support their production capability and their sales and marketing role and back office functions, lots of those. And then we get on to energy, especially renewable energy and green business roles. And that links back into the climate change. Post-pandemic living, demand for products that enable us to generate our own energy, produce our own food, manage our own health, create our own leisure activities. All of that will boom. And then, of course, we've got education, distance learning, collaborative tools. There's a big transformation coming right across the learning sector that's going to take place. Sustainable housing sector, office conversions, the way that we go to the office these days will have to change. I think we'll have to move to more of a destination with purpose. So the offices will be filled with services, sustainable, wellness and wellness solutions, digital technology solutions, different bits of furniture that make it feel a bit more homely and cozy, with distancing in mind because of the pandemic. So all that will change. And then, of course, you've got the financial services sector. There'll be opportunities there. And then finally, the technological sector, which is going to be massive. So there's going to be project and program management opportunities, strategic leadership opportunities, the ability to see the big picture, make connections, understand complexity, because all that's coming down the line. Innovation, communication skills, languages. So there are lots of emerging opportunities out there that I think we can look at, and I've just named some. Sorry, it's not a question. It's more of a bit of research that I've done today, just to get it on the record, really. But yes, I think it's not as hopeless as we all might think. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Smith. What I'll do is I'll take a question from Councillor Race as well, and then maybe Councillor Williams and Andrew can kind of do a two-part response.
Great, thank you, Chair. I've got two questions, I suppose. The first question is, to what extent are we lobbying central government to extend the furlough scheme on at least a sector by sector kind of basis? Obviously, there's plenty of sectors in Hackney that rely on sort of hospitality sector, for example, that rely on people's kind of jobs, and the further kind of restrictions that have been announced today. It looks like, that sector in particular, plus others, will be struggling or will have less time to kind of make themselves kind of available over the next 6 months. So I'd be interested to know what your view is on the furlough scheme. It's coming end at the moment at the end of October, and whether the council would like to see it extended. My second question is around to what extent you are working with Councillor Nicholson in the business kind of with the business brief, because it's all very well, there's many people that we need to reskill and want to reskill, and who want to reskill themselves, but there's significant numbers of people who are in sectors or in businesses that in the short term are facing significant problems, but which in the longer term, in the medium term, would not. And so, are we working hard enough to make sure that we support those sectors in the short term to get through this really difficult period, so that those jobs are still secure and still safe after, as we kind of exit this this kind of pandemic, so that they can continue to do the jobs that they want to do, rather than having to kind of look around at Hackney and see that certain sectors actually have been totally gutted, and having to reskill or sort of look elsewhere for their jobs. So those two questions from me. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Williams, just on the first question that Councillor Race asked, the letter that you mentioned that obviously was signed by, I think 1,000 councillors, which I know that some of us here signed. Was that because I know that yourself and also the mayor signed that too? Is that an indication of council policy as well, or is that sort of just your view and sort of like just to kind of build on Councillor Race's question around the furlough scheme and what the view of the council is?
So are you asking me whether it's a council policy that we should call on the government to extend the furlough scheme?
Yeah, is that the view? So is that, when you signed that letter, is that sort of your view personally, or is that the view of the council as well?
No, that's definitely the view of a number of us as cabinet members. So the mayor, myself, and other cabinet members who signed that. Most definitely, we think that the furlough scheme should be, the government should be doing as much as they possibly can, so that there isn't a cliff edge, so that unemployment doesn't increase drastically at the end of September, and it also into the new year, when I think there's £1,000 payment for those businesses that keep employees until, is it December or January? I forget exactly which date. So no, of course we think that the government should be doing everything they possibly can to protect jobs and protect livelihoods.
Councillor Williams, can I just ask a quick question on that one before you just move on? Do we have any, does the Hackney Council have any evidence or any sort of data that shows what the impact will be? Have we done any modelling of that in support of our argument?
So Simone might be able to come in on specific data that we have. Just in terms of other lobbying, yes, there was that letter from councillors across the country. Phil and I also signed a letter early in lockdown as well, calling for the furlough scheme to be extended to the self-employed. And we signed a further letter, and I'm really sorry I don't have the details to give to you. There was a further letter that we signed calling on the government to extend the furlough scheme as well. So, and that was just before the budget announcement. And then, of course, they extended it to October and made some adaptations and changes to it, so employees can now work part-time, and still their employees can pay for part of the furlough scheme as well. So there are a number of things that we called for. We can always call for more changes, particularly now, so I'll certainly take that away. I do just want to stress one point. We have sent a significant number of letters to ministers over the last 6 months calling for a number of things. Ministers, however, are not necessarily responding to those letters. So letter writing doesn't always give us what we want, particularly locally. And I think that's why it was significant that we worked with other councils across the country on the letter that had, it was something like 1,200 signatories to it. That's why that is so significant. We need to work with other councils. This isn't just something that affects Hackney, it's affecting employees right across the country. There was a question on working with Councillor Nicholson, and of course, I started my introduction by talking about the inclusive economy strategy and building a better Hackney. Of course, we all worked on that as a cabinet. Councillor Nicholson has been very active in supporting local businesses, and in fact sent me information and briefing ahead of tonight's meeting as well. So yes, we are working together. Do we work together on absolutely every jot and tittle? No, because we have very different portfolios. So there have been periods throughout lockdown where we've worked very closely and we've had regular weekly meetings. And right now, I think it's right that both of us have a bit of time to focus on elements of our portfolio that are very different. So I also am the Cabinet Member for Human Resources. I also lead on equalities. And by the way, all Cabinet members are tasked with ensuring that their policies and the strategies that they're working on take account for our equalities priority in the borough. And I also lead on Windrush. And there are elements of other parts of my portfolio on the Black Lives Matter motion that we passed in July and Windrush that also overlap with Guy's portfolio. So there's lots of areas that I do work with him on. And there are times that I think that we just need to get on with the bits of our portfolio that we have not had the time or scope to deal with over a very, very busy period where we've been responding to coronavirus. Hope that helps.
Great, thank you very much. I had a question, just a quick reminder to everyone that I do need to have a 5-minute break in like a couple of minutes. Actually, what I might propose is, Tim, is it okay if I actually have the break now, just for 5 minutes? I just have to move to a different room.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep, no problem.
And yeah, okay, so everyone, I'll be back on the screen in 5 minutes.
Are we pausing recording?
Right, can we pause the recording as well? Is that possible, Tim?
Yeah, I believe so. Bear with me, let me just get Mario to help me with that.
Sorry, Stephen Richards, I know you came slightly later, but just to set context, I am having to move to another room because this part of the building is shutting down at 8. So it'd be incredibly awkward if they're trying to kick me out.
It's such a wonderful, inspiring backdrop as well.
Yeah,
it is, isn't it? No problem, sweaty. See you in a minute.
Slightly semi-religious, you know.
Sorry, are we ready to start, Tim? Okay, perfect.
Yeah, we are. Sorry.
That's okay. I was just wanting to make sure. Okay, yeah, thank you so much for everyone for being understanding. So obviously the video is now recording, and it's available via YouTube for anyone who is watching. So we're just going to continue from where we left off, just looking at some questions in relation to the opening remarks from Councillor Williams and Andrew about where we are in relation to sort of the local economy, and obviously what it means for jobs and skills and etc. So I guess one of the questions that I had for both of you was two questions. So the first one was, I guess, what are the implications for reskilling, particularly on sort of like the more greener economy agenda? And as you know, one of the areas of the commission was specifically looking at, you know, inclusive economy, but specifically looking at this question about, you know, just transition and how we can make sure that we, you know, help support some of our, you know, older residents who've been in the trade for a long time and sort of transition into more sort of sustainable jobs in a way that's more obviously sustainable and doesn't sort of put them out of a job as well. How has that impacted that? And I guess the second question that I specifically wanted to focus on was, I mean, obviously the council has a lot of obviously offers and opportunities for young people in the borough, and I mean, obviously for a lot of them this time would have been extremely stressful because you know if you're from 16 to 24, you're probably going through 2 or 3 different transitions in life, and it's obviously impacted them in very different ways. So I just wonder how it has specifically impacted the existing schemes and opportunities that you specifically lead, whether it's positive or in a negative way. What role has digital exclusion or digital played in that, if any? And also, I know we will come to this at a future point, a meeting, but Andrew, I think it will be really useful as well for the commission just to, in a very sort of brief snapshot, just to hear about the sort of the relationship between the council and what role the council has in relation to the Kickstarter scheme, and some of the work that you're doing around that. I appreciate, obviously, it's all very new, and I know it's not in the local authority's control, but I know we had a discussion about what role the commission can do specifically about making sure that we're pushing to get more devolution to the local authority, to the local council when it comes to the Kickstarter agenda, because from my understanding is obviously private contractors. So it would just be good, I think, for the commission to hear just a very little bit of brief about that too as well.
I'll go off mute. So if I just sort of taking these various in turn, so green jobs, look, I think there's a real opportunity in terms of a framework of the inclusive economy strategy for the public sector to really think about this and to think about when we create work placements and apprenticeships and jobs, not only ourselves, in how we, I guess, can kickstart, to coin a phrase, some of the skills residents might need and acquire in terms of green jobs, because there are lots of green jobs in the council. I'm always slightly uncomfortable with the phrase green jobs because it means so many different things. So I guess there's a need to really think about that as well. But it's certainly on the agenda, particularly in terms of skills. What are some of the different skills people might need to work as construction changes, or as estate management changes, or as, frankly, bits of finance or tech changes? And I'm sure the likes of Councillor Smith, who's nodding, probably knows an awful lot more about this than I do. And in terms of some of your other questions, digital exclusion, I'm sure Councillor Williams will want to say some things on this as well. I'm working very closely with Rob Miller's team of this. So Stephen Haynes, my director, and Rob kind of jointly chairing a piece of work around digital exclusion. I think it's a huge thing. You know, Councillor Williams talked about how he works had moved quite quickly, how we had reorganised the service. That was to a digital focus. The reason we did that was to state the obvious. All of us had to work from home and continue to work from home, so we couldn't have hubs open. But we are now talking quite intensively to services such as libraries, to community halls, as Councillor Palace said earlier, around how can we within COVID-19 restrictions, have some kind of face-to-face offer to provide information, advice, guidance, to provide workshops and learning for people who are not able, for a whole load of different reasons, to benefit from our services done digitally, because it's a huge, huge challenge. And before I hand back to kind of Councillor Williams, your third point is, yes, Kickstart, we're early days, and we're looking at it in terms of how it fits with our existing programs about work placement, because essentially what this is a 6-month work placement program, which is something we were doing already in terms of Hackney 100. I think what's important about this is Kickstart as a program has got a lot of recognition, and people know a lot about it around Hackney. You know, over the last 2 weeks, I've been asked many, many times by businesses what is the council doing around Kickstart. So I think it's a huge opportunity for us to scale what we're doing already on work placement and to breathe more life into what we're doing around things like Hackney Apprenticeship Network, of which there's huge appetite for. But I'll stop there.
So I got really distracted. I'm really sorry. So it was Kickstart and digital exclusion.
Yeah, I mean digital exclusion. Do you want me to repeat it, or
I was just going to come in on those two. On digital exclusion, there is a big piece of work that is going on and has been going on, led by the mayor, and throughout lockdown, a number of cabinet members have been meeting with officers on digital exclusion, including the Deputy Mayor Bramble, myself, Councillor Mackenzie, the Mayor, and I'm sure Councillor Selman. So we've all been involved in those discussions. We've always known that Hackney residents have been digitally excluded, or large proportions of Hackney residents have been digitally excluded. The coronavirus pandemic has highlighted that. It's highlighted it in education. It's highlighted it in terms of access to employment opportunities. It's something that we've really had to consider in terms of our own response in the Employment and Skills and Adult Learning Service. Because what we had to do is quickly move some of our programs online. And I know that even for the apprentices, the apprenticeship team had to source devices and quickly take those out. Sorry, not apprenticeships, but not the apprentices, the trainees, particularly those on the supported employment programme. So they had to source devices and take them out to them. We've had to ensure, we were in the middle of courses, so just making sure that learners could continue their training it's quite challenging. I'm keen that what we do is look at how we flex our learning offer to ensure that when there are further outbreaks that we can quickly move them online. But that does mean adapting the programme. But I also have to bear in mind digital exclusion in the borough. So we can't have an offer that's totally online. We've also got to remember that there are some people who have absolutely no digital online skills at all. And the head of ICT has quickly put some resources online that helps people with the most basic skills to use tablets and phones, etc., so that they can do things like shopping, or they can get on Zoom calls. And one of the best examples, I think, is a little group of Caribbean elders in the north of the borough, who many of them hadn't been able to use a digital device, but now they have weekly classes online, and it's been an absolute lifeline to them, because that's how they have been able to meet up week on week throughout lockdown, and even once restrictions were lifted. And what I was told was that it was like they spent a significant amount of time, about 45 minutes before their exercise class, just trying to get everyone online. And every week somebody either can't get the camera working, or they can get the camera working but they can't get the audio working. And they are really skilled at talking those members through the process for getting online. And we need to learn from what they do. Education, of course, is another area. So digital exclusion is really key, not putting everything online, being able to flex, but also being able to just help people to get online who are going to need to do so in the future. Work, I think, as Councillor Smith was saying, a lot of work is going to be online in the future. And you were asking Councillor Coban about skills, and I think those digital skills are going to become all the more important in the future labour market. And then you asked, I've forgotten the last question already. Can someone remind me? No? Do you want me to finish there?
No.
Happy to.
No. So if you want to, like,
I've forgotten the further question.
Oh, the further question. Sorry, yeah. The first question was specifically looking at how the greener jobs and the greener
scheme was the other thing.
And the Kickstarter. Oh, okay, sorry, yeah. I mean, you don't.
Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, feel free to come in and yeah.
Just on Kickstarter, all I wanted to do is reiterate what Andrew has said about Kickstarter. We are at a really early stage in this, and the employers have been coming to speak to us. They want to partner with us because, of course, you've got to have a minimum of 30. So those employers who have been thinking about doing Kickstarter before the most recent announcement now know that they can't. And as we are a large employer in the borough and we can do the scheme, a lot of people do want to partner with us. We've got to work out the detail of that to deliver in partnership with other employers. The green jobs was always going to be a major plank of the work, and I'm pretty certain, Simone, that it's part of our inclusive economy strategy. It forms a major strand of working there, and it's going to continue to be a major strand in the future. Not sure that I can say anything more than that unless Simone wants to come in.
Well, I think the only thing I would add is that it's also, in a way, quite an important part of our environmental sustainability agenda, because part of that work isn't just about reducing carbon emissions in the council and making the council more environmentally sustainable, but seeing how the borough as a whole can make changes, and that obviously will include talking to our businesses about how they can become greener. And that's also an area, I think, of focus of how we speak to our businesses about changes they might want to make, and obviously following that, then what jobs that creates or what skills they might need for their employees to be able to make those changes.
Thank you both very much. I think we've got, a couple, maybe like 5-10 minutes more for questions. Does any other commission member want to come in at the stage? I'm happy to follow up. Oh, sorry, go ahead. Councillor Palace, and then I'll follow up on another question as well.
I don't know if anybody else has got a question, but yeah, I'll go ahead. So it's one. I was just wondering how many council employees are on the furlough scheme, or if any council employees are on the furlough scheme, and just what the plan is around that. And just picking up on Simone's just last point, one of the things that the Shadow Chancellor Annalise Dobbs mentioned on Monday is about building back better and putting on kind of conditions in terms of subsidies for businesses to kind of encourage kind of best practice. I was just wondering, in terms of how you're kind of looking at the inclusive economy, and one of the major levers is around procurement, and what you kind of see we can do kind of around procurement, potentially coming out of COVID, to encourage what Councillor Smythe was talking about. Thank you.
Shall I just come in quickly on the furlough scheme? I think it's a really easy question to respond to. The furlough scheme was not designed for public sector workers, so no council employee has been furloughed. However, what we have done, certainly what we were doing during lockdown, is that council staff could apply for redeployment within the council, and so we had staff, for example, working over at the food hub at Here East. A lot of those staff are now, so where libraries were closed, for example, those staff were furloughed. Libraries are now open, so some staff are starting to go back to their usual.
And just a question about procurement. I'm glad you asked that question, Councillor Palace, because we're actually doing quite a lot of work with procurement. It's been a bit of a long time in coming, but it's very sort of front and centre of the inclusive economy approach. And as a result, sort of, I'm working very closely with Rotimi in the agenda. Some of the detail around this looks like sort of building on some of the work which we've been doing by kind of Section 106 agreements previously, sort of taking a similar approach, essentially using social value legislation to write into contracts some fairly robust clauses and to require suppliers to create employment skills plans based on a sort of a framework and a template we provide them, setting out what they're going to do in terms of things such as local labour, apprenticeship, work placement, so you know, all the council's agenda, which very importantly we then, employment skills and learning together with colleagues in procurement, then essentially sign off those plans before those contracts are let. So it's part of a sort of scoring of who wins contracts. So we're doing that at the council. It's quite early days, but it will be very important going forward. And we're also sort of working with other public sector partners on this agenda via a kind of network of kind of anchor organisations in the borough. So ourselves, people like Homerton, CCG. So I think I'd say watch this space on that, because whilst procurement isn't always the most sexy, it is a very important area, I would say.
Thank you very much. I guess what I'd like to do to round up this part of the meeting is really to look at sort of what we can do in future meetings. Specifically, I mean, I appreciate right now where we are. Obviously, the picture and the situation is evolving on a sort of week to week, month to month basis, and it's very difficult to kind of, and I'm sure that makes it very difficult for your work too. So I think, you know, as we seek to get a bit more clarity on where we are in the next month or in the next couple of weeks, depending on how things progress with COVID as well, I'd really like to explore, you know, further, Andrew, what we discussed offline around sort of the Kickstarter scheme. Specifically, I mean, whether it's in a meeting format or whether it's in a way where the Commission can help support in terms of lobbying to sort of make sure that Hackney has a role in shaping that, and to make sure that it's you know, it's working for people here. I think it will be really good to sort of explore that as a sort of follow-up to this meeting. And yeah, and unless anyone else has any questions, I'd suggest that we move on to the Commission agenda. Yeah, I'm sure everyone is very keen to watch Boris Johnson's appeal, which we've all missed. But you know, knowing Boris Johnson, I'm sure it's a lot of words about nothing. But yeah, so thank you so much, Councillor Williams and Andrew. We will follow up with you separately, and thank you for all the work that you're doing as well. You know, appreciate it. You've probably been deployed to so many different tasks, especially around COVID response, and I think Hackney's response has been one that we can commend, and it's been formidable. And thank you for all your hard work, and also for all the officers as well, just on record for that.
No, thank you. Thank you for inviting us to speak about the work that we've been doing over the last 6 months. Really appreciate it.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, great.
Right,
Thank you all.
Thank you. You're welcome to stay, but you're also welcome to leave as well. I'll say that.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Simone. Thank you.
No problem.
I love how they left the meeting before they even said bye. So in terms of where we are now, I mean, obviously, like the trouble for our commission specifically, if I'm completely honest, in comparison to some of the other scrutiny commissions, is obviously a lot of them. So, for example, like when you look at health in Hackney, it's obviously, you know, they're much more easier able to sort of scrutinise the specific work, because obviously it's more related to COVID, even in living in Hackney in many regards as well, and obviously with children and young people around schools and education sector. Obviously, with our commission, it's more of like forward-thinking work, which is kind of difficult, especially to kind of get officers and just people, external stakeholders, to start thinking about this stuff, because, as Carol mentioned, they're all sort of stretched to think about how they're responding, and they're being deployed in different ways. And I don't think that thinking has necessarily sort of happened to the extent, because obviously they're just, as I say, you know, the situation is evolving ever so frequently. So in terms of where we left off with the previous meeting in terms of our work plan, I think, Tim, did you want to sort of update us around what we're planning for the review and some of the engagement activities that we're looking at?
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's so much to do that everything at the moment is a bit loose and vague, but at the moment, the plan is in October to speak on building back better post-COVID-19, which will amalgamate some of those green and inclusive economy initiatives. In November, there was talk of developing the 15-minute city if there is, downtick in public transport. That's something Councillor Nicholson was quite vocal about last time. We've got cabinet question time in January. In March, we've got repurposing spaces to support entrepreneurialism and support local economy. And April's meeting, we have nothing penciled in for at the moment. So it's all very loose. It's a never-changing document, so it's not set in stone. It can still be altered completely.
Does anyone have any, how does that sound with everyone? Does anyone have any comments or suggestions or areas that they think that we need to be specifically looking at? I know obviously there's like the emergency transport plan as well, which we did say that we'll come back to at some point. I think we spoke about, I think Councillor Luskin, I think you were saying that we should look at that like in November-ish or something like that. If I'm not mistaken, I think once we...
Yeah, I mean, I think give it time to just bed in first. I mean, I think Steve, Councillor Race, at the last meeting was talking about what we as a council can do to support businesses like hospitality businesses and things like that in terms of, repurposing outside space and things. We were talking about what he'd seen down in Soho. I don't know if that's something that people are still interested in.
Yeah. And I think just to add to that, Councillor Lufkin, thank you. It was that, and then generally, what does the future of it sort of links to the 15 minutes agenda, I think, but what does the future of sort of our town centre strategy look like in the context of kind of COVID and more people both working from home, excuse me, sorry, but also doing more of their kind of retail online, for example. So how do we balance? Does our current strategy for town centres properly reflect?
While we've lost Councillor Race there, in March, we are already doing repurposing local spaces. Does anyone think that should be moved up? No,
yeah. Oh, here we got Councillor Race.
Sorry, for some reason I get kicked out when I start talking. It's I shall take it personally against Google Meets. Yeah, I think I've made my point basically about does the current council strategy and where it puts its resource does it meet the very fast changing kind of scenarios that we're seeing and the shift of consumer behaviour? And should we be revisiting those kinds of strategies? Thanks.
Yeah, I think just before you reconnected, Tim was just saying whether we want to sort of to bring that back up the agenda, and I think that's probably a good idea, just because I think the high streets are, and obviously space and place is quite a big issue now, and there are lots of different vacant properties. Obviously, I know of businesses, specifically myself, who just can't even afford to sort of to reopen because of rent and everything, and just because for them to restock, in terms of cash flow, they'll have to restock and then try to make sales, and obviously with everything that's going to be announced now, I don't know if that's even going to be possible. So I do think there is a serious conversation to have about what our town centres look like. So I think we should definitely have a conversation about that and maybe put forward a suggestion to get Councillor Race's views as well before we take it out to the rest of the group. Yeah,
I think that'd be a really good idea if we could move it up, sometime soon. This is something that obviously Hackney, as a council, we have input into. Do you know what I mean? We control the licensing, we control the street trading. That's something that we can do to help with sort of right now. So yeah, I definitely think we should bring it forward.
Just to add to that, I know, I think it's a great idea. I know an officer who works in Westminster, and who worked literally on the Soho scheme, and she could potentially be somebody to invite to give evidence, potentially.
And I think just on that point, Sam and Mete, because I think there's an interesting question for us about our business improvement districts and where they exist, where they don't exist, why we don't use them all that much. Whereas, because the entire Westminster scheme seems to be driven by the bid, and then so the Covent Garden one I think was also driven by that BID, the bid, and whereas we don't seem to have that much business involvement in that sort of
Right,
sense.
yeah.
So I wonder whether there's sort of a work stream within that about what's out there. Why don't we use bids all that much, for example?
That's a very good point. That's a very, very good point. Yeah, I didn't actually think about that. That's a very good point. Okay, well, in that case, then I think Tim, we should. Councillor Smith.
Yeah, just a quick one. I mean, obviously we're living through precarious times, as I've mentioned before. I mean, I would like to speak about at some stage just about the sort of the resilience of our local economy in general in Hackney, and how we can sort of build its resilience to future shocks, which I think plenty are coming, frankly, down the line. So stuff, just conversations around, you know, kind of risk assessment, management, and stuff of that sort of stuff. Anyway, you get where I'm coming from. You know, a sort of resilience strategy really is what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Because it'll be good to understand. Yeah, I mean that's really good actually, one. Because I think like even in terms of like understanding, I think like even going to Sam's question about sort of like the data around the furlough scheme, and obviously I appreciate that's quite different, but I think just really understanding that, you know, the data of Hackney's economy and as you say, like as a result, the sort of the resilience of it, like it seems to be that we don't necessarily sort of, I mean, we have it at a corporate level in terms of the council, but not in terms of like sort of as a local economy, you know. So maybe that's something that we can kind of follow up with, maybe in a letter or an email to Phil or to Councillor Nicholson, to kind of get a bit more insight about that, to kind of so maybe we can bring that as an update to the commission members. Tim, maybe we can write a letter to the relevant cabinet members to kind of provide us a bit more information about the resilience of our economy.
Okay, I'll get that done. Yeah,
and just to kind of draw out some like key data as well. So like, what are the things that we should be looking out for? What is the council's plans if in case, like for example, a second lockdown happens, and what are they going to be advocating and lobbying for? These are things that I think they probably need to start thinking about, because I mean, I know the Prime Minister's saying they don't want a second lockdown, but I don't see how you can't have a second lockdown if, you know, the numbers go up to like the 40,000, like they say. Yeah, quite worrying. Yeah, very worrying. Very, very worrying actually. Okay, well, I will. In that case, let's follow up with the conversation around you know, the high streets. I think it will be really good to think about bringing in external stakeholders for that as well. But also just some residents. I think it might be good to bring in. I don't know what you think as well, but it'd be good to potentially bring in different stakeholders to get an understanding about what they want to see in their local high streets as well. Because I know it's like in my ward, for example, Gilbert, you know this as well. We've had a long-standing conversation about our high streets. So
yeah. And obviously there's a big argument / conversation / debate going on about who is able and who should have access to public spaces. You know, my view tends to be that at the moment, lots of public space that could be utilised for sort of hospitality in Shoreditch, for example, is currently used by, you know, cars. So I'd prefer to see a bit more hospitality. But, you know, on the flip side of that, you have London Fields, and the entire conversation about who uses London Fields. And so I think there is a sort of within that, there's a big debate about what are our public spaces that we value, and what are they for, and you know, which public spaces do we think should be kind of utilised for different things, for example, as well.
Can I just raise one point? I was just wondering where we are with the inclusive economy strategy, and if in terms, I know it was something that we were discussing around kind of metrics and what the inclusive economy strategy might look like. But I was just thinking particularly in terms of, I know Councillor Nicholson has been offering kind of rent relief to certain businesses. And I was just again tying into procurement, because I just think procurement is one of the key things to come out of this, and about how we, if we are procuring services coming out of, COVID in particular, how we can really, really shape things. So I guess it's just a question about, is the inclusive economy strategy coming back at all in our schedule? And I think we did discuss around that metric for the inclusive economy, and it was too early stage, I think, to then I think broad principles rather than specific. So it would be good to just maybe an update on that, or whether that could fit into something, because I just think it's really important as we come out of COVID that we're really forming those metrics and tying them up with procurement.
Yeah, for sure, 100%. And I think, just to say as well, like, there's nothing stopping us from having more than one agenda and item agenda, so like in one meeting. So I think definitely that's a really good point, Councillor Palace. I think, like, we obviously hear a lot about the principles, but it'll be good to kind of hear more about the detail, and to get an update about that, because I know that they were doing these workshops. So Tim, again, I think if we speak to the responsible officers, so maybe Simone and others, just to find out where they're at with that, and whether it's worth bringing them into the next meeting or the meeting after. Just to make sure, because what I don't want to do is just sort of bring them into a meeting where we just end up having this thing where, they set out what they're going to be doing rather than actually kind of providing the detail. Because I think we already know that what they're going to be doing. So I think council policy, and Sam, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you want to sort of really understand what that specifically looks like, right?
Yeah, I just want to, because I think the big question was around metrics and
yeah, exactly, yeah.
What that really looks like, and we've got the principles which are really, really great in terms of shaping things. But I just think it'd be really good at the kind of metrics, and just, again, thinking about the levers that we actually have as a council to influence what businesses kind of do in their behaviour. And I think procurement obviously key, and about how you could link metrics to procurement, and what that could all look like. I think could be a really fruitful discussion.
Yeah, no, for sure, definitely. So okay, specifically we'll bring them on the metrics. Perfect. Okay, well, I mean, there isn't much more on the agenda apart from specifically we wanted to look at the sort of the work program. We obviously have the cabinet question time, which is going to happen in January. We've got the meeting we're looking at specifically around October. We'll make some changes, just to check the changes based on the discussions that we had. And we will also send you an update around sort of the terms of reference for the review as well, for this upcoming years as well. Are there any other business? Is there any other business?
There was just one quick point. Sorry, I know everybody wants to go off. It's about the transport sector. It's about what we could have businesses there as well.
Whether you could have what? Sorry.
We could have local businesses at
definitely.
Transport section. That was all.
That's a very good point. Yeah.
Okay. Mete, could I ask one thing?
Yeah, of course.
Just at the moment, when we're having these meetings, could we perhaps just have, when we get the relevant papers, or maybe just a minute or two at the start of the meeting, just to get what the latest unemployment statistics are for Hackney?
Very good idea.
So that we start the meeting with, just so that we're just aware of it as the skills economy and growth scrutiny, that we're aware of what the trends in unemployment are in Hackney and London. It doesn't need to be
very good idea.
But
that's a very good idea.
Would that be okay?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a brilliant idea. And also, I think maybe some like key statistics around like our businesses as well. That might also be a good idea too. I'll have a think. Sort of brought to us as an update that officers can provide to us as well, and provide us in advance of every meeting. That's a very good idea. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Mate. Yeah, great. Thank you.
Okay, well, I'm sure you all want to go off and listen to Boris' speech. Maybe not, or Keir Starmer's speech, which was much better. But yeah, no. Thank you all so much for your time today. Thank you to the ICT team again for facilitating this conversation. For your support, and thank you to the residents of Hackney for watching. Take care.
Great.
Okay, thanks, Mate. Thanks, everyone. Lovely to see you all. Bye.
Thanks a lot. See you.